Welcome to my first video covering episode Revenant. Today we're starting strong with a Prismatic Titan build that's essentially the spiritual successor to one of my most popular builds of all time, the Electric Ice Titan. As I'm sure you're all acutely aware by now, Stasis has received a massive glow up this season, and today I'm going to be sharing with you what I believe is the best Titan build that fully takes advantage of these changes. Today we're focusing heavily on the reworked Icefall Mantle Exotic, which when combined with the correct artifact perks and newly buffed aspects produces a truly unrivaled build that trivializes even the highest levels of endgame content. And to prove it, all of the gameplay in today's video is from Expert Onslaught Salvation, which I'm currently 57 levels under power for, and I'm still able to crush it. Icefall Mantle received a complete rework with the release of episode Revenant that now makes it a top contender for best Stasis Titan Exotic. So what does it actually do now? The first part states that getting Stasis weapon kills gradually lets you accumulate frost armor, but more importantly, using your class ability now grants the maximum stack count of frost armor and heals you for each stack gained. The healing isn't anything crazy, it's more of a small boost than a full heal, but the best part, it now works with the thruster class ability. On top of that, instead of a slowing burst, casting your class ability near enemies now releases a freezing burst instead, which is a really nice change that adds to the AoE add clear potential of this exotic. So now, whenever we use our thruster near a group of enemies, we're not only freezing them, we also gain a substantial amount of damage resistance through frost armor, as well as heal from any previous damage taken. We're also going to be making use of the reworked Unbreakable aspect that now truly lives up to its name. The aim of today's build is to show you how you can take advantage of both of these reworks and become an unkillable tank that crowd controls entire ad waves. Furthermore, with the right selection of artifact perks, we can also convert our super ability into an absolute damage monster that eclipses any of its competition. So let's take things one step at a time, starting with our subclass configuration. In order for Icefall Mantle to work properly, we have to be using Glacial Quake as our super of choice. This isn't a bad thing because it is the highest total damage super that Prismatic Titan has access to, and in general, it's just really good for ad clear intense situations. Next up for the class ability, we're taking Thruster because it has the lowest cooldown, and it also lets us take advantage of Icefall Mantle the most because of that fact. For our melee ability, we're taking Shiver Strike. This also got a pretty big rework with the release of episode Revenant. It now attaches a stasis explosive that creates a freezing burst, and it is very, very noticeable. The radius of the explosion is rather large, and it actually does a pretty big amount of damage as well. You will very much notice this when you are playing with this build. Finally, for our grenade, we are taking the Suppressor Grenade. We aren't going to be using this grenade in the build itself because we are going to be using Unbreakable instead. However, this is just here if you fumble Unbreakable and it still allows a source of weakening from your grenade because it is void. For our aspects, we are taking Diamond Lance. This will make it so any shatter or ability kill spawns a throwable lance, and this also received a rework. It now grants 2 stacks of frost armor on slam and can also shatter stasis crystals with either the slam or the throw. This actually pairs quite nicely with Icefall Mantle because now whenever you slam a lance, it gives you a small amount of health because it gives you those 2 stacks of frost armor. So you can use your lances to not only refresh your frost armor, but it also gives you a small amount of health back now as well. Then for our second aspect, we have Unbreakable. This aspect received a substantial rework. It now rewards a huge amount of grenade energy on damage blocked. In fact, it's enough to the point where you can hold your grenade indefinitely as long as you are getting shot at. On top of that, it also taunts enemies to shoot at you now, kind of like a Threaded Spectre does or the new reworked barricades. So you can guarantee that enemies will be shooting at you to charge the Unbreakable and make it deal more damage when you release it. Fragments wise, our first one is going to be Facet of Dominance. This will allow the blast from Unbreakable to weaken enemies as well, and it synergizes very nicely with some of our upcoming artifact perks. Next up we have Facet of Ruin. This will increase the size and damage of the bursts of stasis whenever we shatter a stasis crystal or a frozen target. It's simply there to improve the damage of our AoE ad clear, and because we're going to be freezing things quite often, it's a no-brainer choice. Up next we have Facet of Protection, another no-brainer choice. All it does is simply provide a flat 15% damage resistance whenever we are near 3 or more enemies, and because this build is fairly aggressive, it makes total sense. Moving on, we have Facet of Command. This will make it so defeating frozen targets creates stasis shards, and this is important because stasis shards give a small chunk of our melee energy back, which will allow us to loop our melee more often, and it also feeds directly into Crystalline Converter, a very special artifact mod that I will talk about shortly. Next up we have Facet of Hope. This is going to make it so our class ability recharges 60% faster whenever we have an elemental buff like Frost Armor or Devour, which we will talk about in just a second. So basically we're going to have this fragment active all the time, so it's only going to help to loop our Icefall Mantle special move even more often. Lastly, our final fragment is going to be Facet of Balance. This will make it so rapid stasis kills will give us a bonus chunk of grenade energy. This will allow us to use our Unbreakable more often, which will help with the light energy gains because this build is very darkness damage focused, and it will also allow us to taunt enemies more often. Moving on to our choice of weapons, I've gone for Aga's Scepter. It's excellent for freezing large groups of ads, and it feeds very nicely into facet of command to make more and more stasis shards, which feeds into our melee, which feeds into our freezes, which feeds into more freezes, and so on and so on. I've also gone for an arc primary weapon, ideally with the new perk of jolting feedback. I have it on the new Vantage Point pulse rifle, but you can also get it on a bunch of other weapons too. And also, if you can, I would recommend applying the synergy mod to this pulse rifle, because on multi-kills, this will now let you spawn ionic traces, which will feed into your ability energy gains even more as well. So do try to get yourself an arc weapon with jolting feedback, but if you don't have that, then that's fine. You can just go with another primary weapon of your choice. And the heavy weapon is also personal preference. In the footage you're seeing in the background, I was using a grenade launcher because I also took advantage of the concussive reload artifact perk to apply weaken to any bosses that we happen to come across. As far as exotic armor is concerned, we've already mentioned Icefall Mantle, but stats wise, you do want to prioritize resilience to reduce the thruster cooldown to its minimum, then discipline, then strength. Now we're diving into the artifact because it's far more important than the mod selection, and it's also a little confusing, so I'm going to try my best to explain it to you. In column 2, we're going to be taking one with frost. This will make it so whenever we have frost armor, our stasis weapons will feel a lot nicer to use because it gives a boost in reload speed and handling. Then the second perk is your choice between Fell the Revenant or Enhanced Ether Generator. It's really down to personal preference. Would you rather deal slightly more damage to Scorn or have your Dark Ether weapons make more blobs, which by the way is an S tier origin trait, so it's really up to you. Moving on to column 3, we have Crystalline Converter. This makes it so gathering stasis shards spawns an amount of crystals corresponding to the number of shards gathered. However, it does take quite a lot of shards to charge the meter on the left side of the screen, and the maximum crystal count is 3, so you won't notice this artifact perk all the time, but it is nice to have. Next in column 3, we're taking Power from Pain. This will make it so rapid final blows against weakened combatants grants Devour, and this does work with the Unbreakable Blast because we have Facet of Dominance on. So this is going to be excellent for staying alive in tough situations because all you need to do is draw all the fire, release, and get rewarded with Devour. Moving on to column 4, we have Armor of Eramis. Whenever we're holding frost armor, if our shields break, we emit a freezing burst exactly like Icefall Mantle. This just serves to improve our survivability even more in some tough situations. Next we have Hail the Storm. This will just make it so crystal shatters release slowing projectiles. However, it's here that the boost is more important than the main perk itself, and I'm going to talk about that when we move on to the Tonic section. But after that, we then have Concussive Reload to make it so our grenade launchers apply weaken to any bosses. This has nothing to do with the build really, but it's just there to improve the overall experience. Finally, in column 5, you're going to be choosing Served Cold. This is possibly the best artifact perk this season as it's hugely important. It makes it so collecting stasis shards now gives you class ability energy on top of the melee energy that it already gives, which helps to loop Icefall Mantle even more. And then we're also taking Brain Freeze. This will make it so whenever we freeze a single enemy in a group of ads, it's surrounded by a slow field. It's not too broken, but it is handy to have as an extra. Now, that might be a lot to keep track of, so let me explain it simply. Basically, using Thruster grants you frost armor, which improves the feel of your stasis weapons. It also lets you emit a panic freezing burst if you get taken down to red health. Defeating frozen enemies frozen by Thruster or Aga's Scepter or Shiver Strike spawns stasis shards. Collecting those shards grants you melee energy, class ability energy, and also generates stacks of Crystalline Converter to supercharge your next Shiver Strike melee bomb. Frozen enemies are surrounded by slowing fog that freezes more enemies and lets the entire loop happen again. More shards are formed, more thrusters can be used, and as such, more frost armor is acquired, and so on and so on. Finally, for our choice of Tonic, the brand new system that came with Episode Revenant, we are going to be choosing the refined tonic of Stasis Crystallization. This is going to boost Crystalline Converter and Hail the Storm. For Hail the Storm, it increases the enemy and crystal shatter damage by a large amount, which is very big for buffing the damage of our overall setup, but especially Glacial Quake. With Starry to Scales, Facet of Ruin, and this tonic, well, just look at this clip. Now that we've got the main part sorted, let's wrap things up by talking about our mods. For the helmet, we're taking Dynamo to make it so we get a small amount of super energy whenever we cast our thruster near enemies, which we're going to be doing a lot. And then I've also gone for Arc and Stasis Siphon so that you make orbs with both of your weapon types. For the arms, we have Harmonic Loader to make Aga's Scepter feel slightly better to use, and then Focusing Strike and Bolstering Detonation to feed thruster as much as we can. For the chest piece, we're just taking resist mods, and for the boots, I'm going Recuperation, which is a very strong mod, especially in aggressive builds, Absolution, Evolution for a little bit more ability energy, and then Stasis Scavenger to keep Aga's Scepter topped up. Finally, for the class item, I've gone for Reaper because we're going to be using our class item a lot, and also Powerful Attraction for the same reason. Finally, we've also gone for Special Finisher in case we need to top up Aga's Scepter. As far as the gameplay loop is concerned, it is a very aggressive build. The aim is to get stuck into a large group of ads, pop your thruster to freeze them all, then spam your abilities and weapons and kill every frozen target you see, and then just repeat the whole process once your thruster returns. At the same time, if you're in a big group of ads and you don't have your thruster available, do use Unbreakable to draw all of the fire to proc Devour for yourself, which will then increase the grenade energy you get from subsequent kills, which helps to sustain the loop even more. I've personally been having a lot of fun with this build in Onslaught, and it is very, very good for crowd control, especially on maps like Widow's Court that have very tight corners and small rooms. Anyway, as always, there will be a dim link in the description for you to copy the build hassle-free. I hope you enjoyed my first build for episode Revenant, and I'll see you in the next one. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Your support means the world. And if you're really into the content I create, consider becoming a member of the channel, which not only lets you support me in the best way possible, it also nets you a whole host of awesome perks along with it. A massive shout out to these members up on screen, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.